the 17th, 2009. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with Oklahoma State University Library, and I'm here in Stillwater to talk with Dick Heath, a graduate of OSU OAMC, 1950, correct?
Correct.
Let's start by having you tell us a little bit about where you were born, and then we'll work forward.
Okay, I was born in Perry, Oklahoma, June the 5th, 1927, but didn't have no recollection of it. My folks moved to Cordell right after that, Oklahoma. I have no recollection of that. Then we moved to Stillwater on January the 1st, 1930. My dad was the manager of Central States Power and Light, which is the forerunner of Oklahoma Natural Gas, and he had been the manager in Perry and then in Cordell, and then they moved him to Stillwater. They wanted to move him back to Cordell in the middle of the Depression, and he felt the only way my brother and I'd get a college education was to stay in Stillwater, so he quit his job in the middle of the Depression. He got another one at the newspaper, and life goes on from there, but so only recollection that I have is living in Stillwater, Oklahoma. I was 2.5 at that time.
And your mother was a stay-at-home mom, or?
She was a stay-at-home mom, which most of them were in those days.
Sure.
You know.
Any other memories you want to share about the Depression? You would have been in grade school then?
Well, yeah, I was 6 in 1933, so went through grade school basically during the Depression and high school during World War II. So actually, it didn't come out of the Depression really till after World War II. So I grew up in that period of time, not wanting for anything, you know, but nobody had anything, basically. Some of my friends were kids of a university professor, but in those days, I mean, they didn't even make much money. So none of us, there wasn't a lot of money at that time, but there wasn't a lot, you know, we had 3 meals a day and grew up fine. Just everybody was pretty much the same, though, really.
And you had one brother?
Had one brother.
Had anyone before you gone to OAMC in your family?
My brother he graduated from high school in 1940 and lacked 1 semester graduating when he went into service and then was killed in Germany in World War II.
Did you have a choice as to where you would go to college, or was it always going to be here?
Oh, no, there wasn't any choice in those days. I lived 3 blocks from the university campus, so there wasn't any question. The house that I grew up in was at 520 Monroe, which is the last house in the south end where the Development Foundation built their building. They took my house, but I moved up there. We moved up there, let's see, June the 1st, 1933, right before I was 6 years old. So that's the house I grew up in. I went to grade school at Eugene Field, which is where the IGA is now, at 6th and Washington. There weren't school lunch programs at that time. I came home at noon and ate and went back. And then the big celebration was every once in a while my mother would have something at the church at noon. And so I couldn't go home for noon. And they'd give me 15 cents. And the Aggie Barbecue was right across the street there. And I could go over and get a big hamburger for $0.10 and a bottle of pop. And, you know, that was a celebration when I was a kid growing up. Didn't happen very often, but we did have it.
And so since we're talking a little bit about Stillwater itself, did you go to the library very often?
Not too often, no. We did go to the library at times, but not too often. You just kind of grew up.
Well, I know in the early 30s, it wasn't the building that's on 6th Street. It was a smaller white framed house. Do you remember?
Yeah, I'm not even sure. I'm aware I remember when they built the one on 6th, but I'm not quite sure when it was.
Okay. So while you were attending OAMC, you lived at home?
Oh yes, yeah. I lived at the fraternity house 1 year, but the rest of the time I lived at home. And even then, there weren't a lot of automobiles as far as the students were concerned. I know my brother, I'm a Beta, and before the war at the Beta house there was one car, which hardly, the kids today can't fathom that. After the war there were probably 8 or 10 automobiles, and fortunately I lived 3 or 4 blocks from the Beta house. If I had a date, where I grew up, it was a detached garage. I could go use the family car and then take it and put it back in the garage and go back to the Beta house. And it's like 3 or 4 blocks away. So it was not anything. It was an interesting time.
What kind of things would you do for fun?
Growing up?
Or on campus, either one.
Either one. Well, there were a lot of activities on campus, and a lot of activities connected with the fraternity on campus. And so for fun in the intramural sports, there were a lot more dances, I think, than there are now. And then there was dance hour at the sorority houses during the week. We'd go to those. Hung out at the frat shop, which has been long gone. It was across the street from the Chi Omega house. My wife was a Chi Omega. And it was across the street from the Chi Omega house. And so it was a hangout spot during that time, particularly for the groups, the fraternities and sororities that were close to there. There were just maybe 4 or 5 booths inside, but the front porch was always full of people and everything. No hard liquor of any kind, just soft drinks and coffee. But it was a hangout. And like I say, the fraternity took up a lot of the time, and then I belonged to Beta Alpha Psi, which is the accounting fraternity. Member of Blue Key, played in the band at the football games and all. They didn't do the intricate designs that they do on the field now. We did some, but certainly it was not even close to what goes on now. And then sports, Oklahoma A&M sports. I've been a sports nut since I was a little kid, and so I attended everything that they did at that time, the football games, the basketball games, the wrestling, which basically was it. And in fact, in growing up, I don't know how many people are still around that went to sports in the old gymnasium, which is now the architecture building. But that's where they played until '39, I think, when the field house was built. And and I was, Stillwater was, we didn't worry about safety. We wandered all over town when you're little. Didn't drive all over town because nobody had a car. None of the kids had a car. But you wandered all over town. You wandered all over the university. Went to the basketball games in the old gymnasium. Went to wrestling matches in the old gymnasium. And so that was a real big thing in my life growing up.
Sounds like you stayed pretty busy.
Oh yeah, it was not a problem. Not a problem. And then, in the younger years, there wasn't organized sports, but you're playing football in the front yard or baseball over where the hospital now sits, because that was a vacant field when we were growing up. But it was an interesting time, and things that basically didn't take money because there wasn't much money.
Well, speaking a little bit about money, how did you finance your college education?
Well, I got out of high school in '45, and World War II was still on. So I went in service in June of '45. War was over when I was in the Navy. War was over when I was in boot camp. And then they started letting them out. So I was fortunate. I only spent 14 months in service and got out in August of '46. But it put me through 3 years of school. So I didn't have to work when I was going to school. I made enough in the summers at various jobs to pay for the year that I didn't have the GI Bill.
Pretty lucky there.
And then, yeah, very fortunate. The timing was very fortunate.
What led you to choose accounting as your major?
Well, I'm not real sure. My brother was in accounting before he went in service. But then I took aptitude tests, and basically it said engineering. My math's always been strong. And I thought if you're an engineer, I didn't realize you might be able to work for yourself. I thought you'd always have to work for somebody else. So I looked around and I thought accounting was the best school in the School of Business was the best degree I could get, so I went into accounting. Not really knowing everything that they even did.
And you're glad you did, huh?
Oh, I'm glad I did. I graduated in 1950. And the World War II vets were still coming out of college. The economy really hadn't picked up that much, and jobs were very scarce. I was fortunate enough that I had a job with Southwestern Bell. They'd interviewed both here and at OU and hired 6 people, and I felt fortunate I was one of them. And then before I went to work for Southwestern Bell, Pete Morwick, the accounting firm, international accounting firm, called and offered me a job. And kind of a funny story here, you go through the interview and people can't even understand it, but Mr. McCune, who was hiring me, said, well, what are they paying you? I told him I had another job. Well, I said, $250 a month. Well, he said, that's our starting pay. Actually, they were paying me $240, but I thought I could slip in another $10 there. And $250 a month. Now, try to explain that to my children or grandchildren today's day. My hourly wage was $1 something, and now the minimum wage is $6 something. So, but at that time, I went to work at $250 in July of 1950. We got married in December of that year. And by then I'm making $275, and Marilyn got a job at about $190, and then they raised her to $210. And so we're making about $500 a month. We had more money at that time than we did till the children were all gone from home. I mean, things were inexpensive, and so there's no way that my children or grandchildren can even understand the economy at that time. It's all just escalated.
And have you stayed in Stillwater your entire career then?
I worked for Pete Marwick in Tulsa for about 4 years. We had one child, and Marilyn was pregnant with the second one. And we said, let's go home. She grew up in Perkins. My wife grew up in Perkins. So I said, let's go home. And went back here, not real sure exactly what was going to happen. I worked with her dad and her brother in the manufacturing business in Perkins for a couple of years. Decided that I wanted to get back in the accounting business and went to work for a man here with the idea that I would buy his practice. After a couple of years, I saw that that wasn't going to happen. So I opened my own office in November of '59. We had $200 and 3 kids, and started there. And I thought I had to borrow a couple thousand from the bank, which they wanted everything that I had secured, plus my dad's signature, which I thought was ridiculous. But we had to start someplace, and so that's where we started. And I had my own office here in Stillwater, and enjoyed that. The rest of my working life, after a number of years, and that was pre-computer accounting, and so it was very intense. I went to work January 1 and worked through January 15th, 10 or 12 hours a day during tax season, because that's when you could make enough to survive the rest of the year. And worked there, but I sold my practice. I took in a partner and sold it to him in 1980. At that time, we owned a nursing home, which I'd bought when my clients had died and his wife was unable to run it. And so had a nursing home, and we operated it till 1983, and then sold it because the staffing problems and everything else. And so I let down. I wasn't retired, but I was semi-retired, you know, and doing a few other things. And then in 1987, when Governor Bellman was elected governor the second time, we'd worked in campaigns and became very good friends of the Bellmans, and he wanted me to go down as administrator of the tax commission. I told him I was really pretty happy with my life, you know, and didn't think about that, but he's a persuasive man, and he'd done his duty, and so I thought I could do mine. So I went down for 4 years as administrator of the tax commission, probably the first Republican that had been inside the tax commission in the history of Oklahoma. And did enjoy it. We got an apartment down at 6,000 Penn, and I'd go down Monday morning, and Marilyn would come down on that afternoon, and we'd stay down there during the week unless she had some reason to come back. It wasn't far, but I didn't want to commute. And so that took care of 87 to 91. And after spending 4 years in the state government, and I enjoyed it. We made some changes that helped, but then about the last 6 months I'd had all of it that I cared for, and so in 91 I came back and I did retire in 1991. Completely. I still do our taxes, and a couple of things we're involved with, and our daughter's taxes. I do those. Did a couple of old friends that lived out of town for a while, but they're gone now, and so I'm down to just the things that we're involved with. And I try to stay up enough to be aware of the problems, and then, you know, with the computer now, well, you can get a program that you can do taxes with. It's pretty good.
Well, let's back up a little bit and let you tell me how you met your wife, since
I met my wife.
Since you've mentioned her a couple of times.
It's really kind of interesting. I could say she grew up in Perkins, 11 miles south or 10 miles south of here. I'd known her brother for a while. He's a year older than I am. And I'd known him in DeMolay. He belonged to DeMolay up here, so I knew who he was. Then I knew who he was in college. I knew who Marilyn was, and I think she knew who I was. But we hadn't ever dated or anything. And the night I graduated from college in May of 50, we were behind the Beta House. She was behind the Beta House with a fraternity brother of mine in a car, and we were all sitting out there behind her at that night. And that was in May, and so on my birthday, 23rd birthday, I guess, the 5th of June, I called her, and we had a date. We went to the Fond du Lac in Drumright, which had a good dance floor, and also there's prohibition in Oklahoma, but it didn't bother them in Creek County. And so we went over there and danced, and from there on, I was now working in Tulsa. I was going to go to work in Tulsa. She was this was her sophomore year in college, and very boring for her because she was going with me, and I was just here on the weekends, and so she went for a while, and then quit college. We got married December the 23rd of that year, so this will be our 59th anniversary this year. We think it's going to work. We went together about 6 months before we got married.
Must have been love at first sight, or
Well,
not really, but
You
first date.
you never know. She knew, like I say, she knew who I was. I'd gone with a friend of hers that she lived in the dorm with. But I think it was time both of us were ready to get married.
So this happened after you graduated, so you didn't get thrown in Theta Pond then?
No,
No.
I didn't, but a number of them did. But so did get to go on the serenade that we always did when somebody became engaged, and went to the Chi Omega house and sang. So we did do that, but no. And it's been, like I say, it's been an interesting time. We like each other. We love each other. So the last years have been absolutely unbelievable.
Right. And you had 3 children?
We have 3 children.
How many of those 3 went to OSU?
All 3 of them have graduated from OSU.
Okay.
Janet is I don't know when they graduated. She had a degree here, and she's been a teacher in the Tulsa school system for years. She's at, she taught at Carver first, was the magnet school, and now she teaches at Washington in the high school there. Second daughter graduated here, but she went and then got married, and then made up her mind that she was going to get her degree prior to the time that her second son got his degree here. And so she went back and graduated in 60, maybe, or 60 something. And no, or maybe 80. Yeah, she got her degree, I think, in 80. And is a vice president of a bank here in town, lives here in town. And then our son cunningly turned 4 years into 7. He's a golfer. Of course, golfer growing up here, you wanted to go to Oklahoma State because of the golf program. And he was a good high school golfer, but they didn't. They were loaded at the time he got out of high school. So he went to McLennan Junior College in Waco for 2 years. Won the National Junior College, and then Mike wanted him back here. So he came back here the last 2 years and lacked a little bit of graduating, went out on the mini tour, and then came back finally and graduated after about 7 years from the time he started. Got his degree here. First grandchild is a daughter of the one that lives in Tulsa, of our daughter that lives in Tulsa. So she went to TU and graduated there. Second grandchild of the daughter here, he went to Grinnell, but came back and spent his junior year, I think, here, then went back and graduated from Grinnell. The third grandchild graduated from here and has just finished his doctorate of pharmacy right now. He's just finishing up right now. Will be in pharmacy. And so then the fourth grandchild, the son of our son lives in California. And he was a pretty good high school wrestler, and John Smith asked him to walk on here. He spent his freshman year here, and with the wrestling team, determined he loved wrestling, but knew he wasn't going to be a national champion, so he decided that after his freshman year he wouldn't wrestle anymore. Went to a community college his next semester in California and hated it. Is back here now. He's a junior and back here in Oklahoma State. Will graduate from here next year and loves it. And then the next grandchild is a senior in high school, or a freshman in high school in California. She will, I don't know whether she'll come here or not. She may. She talks about it. And then we have a great grandchild that's 5, lives in Louisville, Kentucky with his mother. and have no idea what's going to happen to him. He's a dandy.
Well, so 3 generations so far of OAMC or OSU.
Right. You know, my brother would have been the first one in my family to get a college degree, but then he was killed in the war, and so I was the first one actually to get a college degree.
Well, what is it about OSU that keeps people devoted to it and generations coming, you think?
I'm not sure. I think it's the atmosphere. It's a friendly campus, and the people that go here generally enjoy it. We've had a lot of friends that couldn't wait to get out of here and get away from Stillwater, and then came back. Mm-hmm. So it's just a nice place. And Stillwater is a wonderful town to live and raise a family in. When I was growing up, it was a little town. You know, I knew practically everybody in town when I was growing up. It was small. The school was small. Your education, the 7th grade through the 12th grade, actually went to school together in the place that's the community building now and the library. And you actually went back and forth sometimes for classes. And then the band shack and the shop were down at South High. So you were going back and forth, and it was little. You started playing in the high school band in the 7th grade. They needed you. You know, it was a small, and it has, of course, grown a great deal now. There was very little industry when I was growing up. There wasn't any industry. Our business was the college. That's where, and the college pretty well controlled the town at that time. But I've been fortunate. I didn't know Dr. Bennett. I knew who he was, but then he was killed during the war. But all the presidents then, Dr. Wilhelm came behind him. He and my folks were very good friends. And so basically I've known them all since that time. The good ones and the bad ones.
We won't ask which is which.
Now I think right now we have the best situation that we have probably ever had for the growth and healthiness of the university with Burns Hargis. I've felt forever that we should have had a president and a, whatever you want to call the other one, a provost or whatever it might be, that handles the academic side, and the other one that handles the publicity side and the growth side. And I think we have that right at the current time. But we've just now moved into it. We've always had an academician that was president, and I felt that, well, since Bennett. I don't think he was, and that's why it grew to start with. But that's what I think you have to have both sides of it. When I had my accounting practice, practically all the vice presidents and most of the deans were clients of mine, and so had a close relationship. In 1973, I was president of the chamber, and we had the chamber officers and the president of the university and the vice presidents. We met, I think, once a month or once every 2 months. We would host a dinner one time, or just a meal at noon one time, and they'd host it the other time. And we solved a lot of the problems before they existed for the Stillwater and for the university. And I don't know whether that's still going on. I would hope that it would, because it was a very healthy situation. And actually that's when Dr. Kalm was president. And it was a good, healthy situation for the town, and helped us grow in both ways.
Well, it's changed a lot, though, since you were there, too. The campus itself has. Can you tell us a little bit about which buildings you had classes in? Do you remember?
Yeah, some of them don't exist because they were the Quonset huts that we used after the war.
Okay.
Terrible if you had a class that was at 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the spring, because it was warm. And they weren't air conditioned, they were just there, you know, the doors were open. But most of them in Moral Hall, because I was in business college.
Okay.
And the majority of my classes were there. Trying to think where the others might have been, but most of them were there. I mean,
Any in Old Central?
had one class in Old Central, an econ class, and I think it was, not sure whatever Dr. Jewett taught. He wasn't an econ professor. I'm not sure what he taught, but it was an econ. It was up in the second floor of Old Central, and I'm delighted that they're preserving it and making it the honors college. I think that's very neat. At that time, it needed a lot of help, but.
Well, do you remember some of your favorite professors?
Gene Shower was probably the best. He and Burl Austin were probably the best accounting professors, because I thought you learned more under them than you did the others. They're, you know, it was relatively small. There weren't but 4 or 5 accounting professors at that time. And we'll tell you an interesting story about being a professor. When I opened my office, got ready to open my office in 1959, and doing anything I could to feed a wife and 3 kids. But after in the summer, I guess it had to be the summer of 60, Dick Vandergrift died. He was the auditing instructor at the university. And B.F. Harrison was still head of the accounting department. And he called me and said, we can fill all the Vandergrift spots except auditing. We don't have anybody qualified to teach auditing. I'd worked for Pete Morrow for 4 years. He said, would I teach a class? I said, yeah, they do that. I think they paid me $150 a month. And I taught a class the first semester, and then an advanced class the second semester, and enjoyed it. But I felt that you could teach and work a little on the side, but you can't work and teach on the side because it took too much time away from my practice to teach the auditing course. I enjoyed it. And you know, some of the people that you had in your class, Dan Draper was in my class that later became Speaker of the House, and was a good student. He just was having a little off year that year. He didn't come to class very much, but he was an excellent student. And then you have interesting things that happen later in life when John and Caroline Linehan have a house right down from us here. And when I first met them, when they came back and were building down here, he said, didn't you teach a class, auditing class? And I said, yes, I did. And he said, I was in your class. And he later went on to a very successful business career, and very well known.
Small world, and they come back around.
Small world, right. And like I say, but my teaching career was 1 class 1 year. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the students. The advanced class that I had just had 10 students in it. And so I really didn't even need to give them a test when we got through, because we'd open discussion and talk all year. And I knew their abilities very well because there were just 10 of them. It was great. Loved it. Loved it.
Well, what advice would you give current students?
You know, that's pretty difficult. I've been removed from it so long. I'd certainly advise them to study, you know. And I think, you know, I don't know whether grading's easier now. It seems like we've got a lot more bright students than we had. I think one thing the university is it's harder to get in. You know, back when we were in school, you could get in the university. Now I think you have to have pretty good credentials just to get into Oklahoma State. And so perhaps overall they are brighter. I would encourage them not to just study, but to be involved in campus activities and other things that are going on, so that you do broaden your scope, broaden your horizons. And just when I was there, the accounting students that were just the brains and virtually had nothing else, people would hire them for their knowledge, but they had trouble advancing because they weren't able to handle people and become administrators. And so they had a job, and they had a good job, but a lot of them were stuck in that good job. And unless they had the skills to interact with people, they didn't advance like some of the others did that could handle administration along with the problems of business. So I just say, you know, do it all. And enjoy it too. And enjoy that part of it too, because you're only going to go through college once.
Sure. Well, do you get back on campus very often?
Well, for sports, we have basketball tickets and we have football tickets. And go to some of the wrestling matches when they're here. We're gone from January 1 through March. We go to California now. It's cold here, and so we like to get out of it. So we spend 3 months a year out there right now. So even though I've got basketball tickets, I'm not here for basketball season. Our daughter has the tickets when we're gone. She also has tickets, but she sells hers and uses ours because the seats are better. But as far as other activities, not too much anymore.
I was just curious, if you walked across campus, what thoughts you might be having.
Oh, well, one of the thoughts that I have is that, my gosh, we've got a bunch of new buildings and construction going on all the time. Because, and it's a very pretty campus. I think back, Phil Wilbur was the school architect. Back, gosh, probably, well, when I was in school, and then when I was an alumni, and he was their school architect for a long time, and one of them that helped create the Georgian atmosphere that we have on campus. And I think we have a very pretty campus. We have one that's used by the students. It's certainly used on football weekends for tailgating now, and that's crazy. That didn't exist. Of course, we were here. Well, I was in high school during the first glory years, the Bob Fenimore's time and Neil Armstrong's time, that where we went to the Cotton Bowl and the Sugar Bowl and had one of the top teams in the country during World War II. And I was in high school, but very much involved. I knew most of the guys that were on the football team because it was little. The campus was small. We had service people in here that lived in dormitories. One story I did want to tell you, because growing up at 520 Monroe, which was Monroe Street, and during the war, prior to World War II, where the hospital sits now, was a CCC camp, the Civil Conservation Corps, that some of Roosevelt's things that he put in to try to pull us out of the Depression. And they lived there. There were barracks there. Then during World War II, the barracks were taken over. I think it was the Air Force that was there. And they I don't think ate there. I think they ate on campus. So early in the morning, 6 o'clock or 6:30, they'd come down Monroe Street singing, and which was kind of nice. And they came right down Monroe, went up to campus, and then started their day's activities. But during World War II, we had a lot of service people. We had some of the Air Force, some of the Army, the Waves, and I don't know whether we had the Army women in here or not. I can't remember, but you would know more than that. I mean, you'd have that in your history more than I would. But we had a lot of service people. I worked at Miles Student Store, which is where the pizza place,
Hideaway?
the Hideaway Pizza is now. That was Miles Student Store during World War II. And I was in high school, and I worked up there some after school and on the weekends, worked back engraving or billfolds and fountain pens and all, and then selling Indian jewelry. Well, we had a bunch. See, communication didn't exist then like it does now with the computer and television. And so the service people that came in here from the east were concerned. They still thought there were Indians were active in the area, and also it was a fun time. And so I worked there and sold stuff for them, and interacted with the service people that were here, the students that were here. That was a student hangout at that time. And Miles Student Store was. At one side was a fountain and a restaurant, and the other side had books. And like I said, just sold things to the people. So it was an interesting time. But I don't know. I think maybe the students are a little more dedicated as a whole now than they were in those times. Maybe not, but that's my observation. Maybe there's the same group that existed at our time.
Changed much.
Right after the war was an interesting time on campus because we had students coming out of high school. We had people who'd been overseas for 3 and 4 years in combat. In the fraternity house, we had one guy that was like 16 and one that was 30. You know, the one had not only been in service, but been unable to finish his education financially, but then the GI Bill let him come back to school. So you had a mixture, and it was a very difficult time, I think, for perhaps at least the younger ones, because of alcohol. You know, you're trying to say there'll be no alcohol in the fraternity houses, and you've got guys that have been in war for 3 years and overseas. So it was a little bit difficult at that time. I mean, because of the difference in age and the difference in backgrounds. But we survived it.
And what was homecoming like?
Oh, great. It was great in those days. Everybody got involved with it. I can think, you know, of the different, you know, the floats that we probably had more floats then because there wasn't even the action much between the two, fraternity and sororities, that they go together now. Each one would do one. It was bigger then. And huge. It was a big day for us when I was in college, but it was also a big day after when we were raising the kids, because you'd get up, you'd go to the parade and go to the fraternity house or sorority house, generally the fraternity house, at noon before the game, and then go to the game and then come back, and we had places we went afterwards. It was a big day. Growing up, and a big day when we were in school. The activities were, and so I'm delighted that Oklahoma State still carries it on as one of the few places in the country, because it's big. And I think it is a great atmosphere.
Well, did you have an opinion when the name changed from?
Oh, not really. You know, even though I'd grown up to Oklahoma A&M, I thought it was fine, and I thought it was done very well. And of course, also when I was growing up, and I graduated before they opened the union. It opened in the fall of 1950 after I'd graduated in May of 1950.
Okay.
But when I was a kid, Washington Street went right through the campus. The library didn't exist, the union didn't exist. And when we went north of town, we went down to Washington Street and went up north on Washington. And there were a lot of the buildings that are here were there at that time. But certainly the library wasn't there. The road went right through where the library is now.
It must have been interesting watching the union being built.
Oh yeah,
It's such a big
it was.
building.
It was because and then we used it a lot. It was open when Marilyn, my wife, came back for her second year. It was open, and then we went to a lot of things. A lot of things were held in the union, so we've been in the union a bunch. Haven't been there too much in recent years, but
The Starlight Lounge, Starlight Terrace, the
Yeah.
Starlight Terrace, dances and stuff.
oh yeah, we held dances in the union. Fraternity and sorority dances were held in the union. They were held in the old gymnasium, which is the architecture building now, because it had a great floor, had a basketball court, you know. So there were dances held there. There were dances other places. You know, some of them mixed up because in high school had dances at Hoke Hall, which is the building at 7th and Husband downtown, the third floor of that. Dances were there, high school dances. Fiscus Hall, which is up over Case, that was Fiscus Hall. There were dances up there. The one thing we had, you know, prior to and just after the war, there were 3 good dance bands here, and there were 3 of them right after the war. My brother played in one of them, and then it went from 3 down to 1 as the guys went into service. He played in one that started with the student entertainers. Jimmy Baker was the director, and then he had a band after the war too, but great dance bands on campus of the big band era. And an interesting thing for talking about money, my brother was the treasurer of the dance band because the others weren't as responsible as he was. So after they played a dance, well, here are the guys that all come down to the house to get their $5. That's what they got for playing a dance. It was $5. And then after the war, like I say, we had 3 great bands on campus, and it's still the big band era. Harry James came in here for the junior-senior prom at the field house one year. I know my wife's got a bunch of things that I'm skipping, but I'd like to interject. But it was, you know, a lot of things went on, you know. And like I say, I don't know that they have the dances now that they used to. Do they on campus?
I think they're starting to have more.
Have they? I think it's great. It was interaction.
They had the Howdy dance. I've heard.
Yeah, that was
Howdy.
that was the opening dance, and in fact, I know they had it sometimes at the old gym. They had it there. Maybe I don't know whether they had it at the field house or not. Mr. Ivo was always very protective of the floor.
Mm-hmm.
However, you know, we used to go up and on Saturdays and all and play basketball in the old gymnasium. It was not closed off to anybody. The kids from high school, we'd go up there and play basketball at the old gym, or at the field house. Interesting war story. Of course, World War II, they had scrap metal drives. They were doing everything to collect scrap metal and turn them back into guns and ammunition and stuff. And when they had moved from the old gymnasium to the field house, they took a bunch of the lockers that had been in the old gym and put them in the basement of the field house. The basement of the field house at that time was dirt. You know, there was a track down there, but it was basically just dirt. And several of us from the high school went up there with sledgehammers and beat the old lockers into scraps where they could haul it out and turn them into scrap metal and turn them into war-needed necessities.
You were instructed to do that? You didn't do it just to be mischievous?
No, we were instructed to do that, yeah.
Interesting.
They were doing everything they could to get scrap metal, you know. It's a shame they don't do some of it now and clean up some of the spots that are around our country, you know. But we needed it then in World War II. And different time, different war that everyone was involved. And there were conscientious objectors who were people that didn't like to kill, but there were not people objecting to the war. Everything we've had since that time, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, we have people that object and protest. That didn't exist in World War II. Everyone wanted to be involved. We had victory gardens because things were hard to get. You had supplies of gasoline were poor. You had coupons to get gasoline. You had red meat coupons to get meat. And so people grew gardens, and we had chickens in the backyard. My dad built a little chicken house. We had 6 hens that laid eggs, provided those. It was a different time. Everyone was involved in one way or the other. People worked in the plants, and so it was different.
Stillwater actually had victory gardens?
Oh yeah,
Did they?
we had one. The area. Well, when I was growing up, basically the west edge of Stillwater, south of 6th Street, was Adams Street, which is just the first block west of Monroe. Beyond there, there were a few things out 9th Street, and then the hospital was built in, I think, in the 30s, in the late 30s. And I'm not sure when the hospital was built there, but the area from 6th to 8th and west of Adams Street, it was all, I mean, they plowed up little areas, and people went out there and worked in the evening and raised vegetables. And we had potatoes and tomatoes and all kinds of stuff that we raised out there. Because there wasn't an abundance. You couldn't go to Walmart or IGA or food court and get things. They just didn't exist. And so then and the west, the west edge of Stillwater, north of 6th, was Orchard Lane, basically. There wasn't anything west of there. When we were in college, the paved road ended where Westwood School is at the current time. When I'm in college, I-35 didn't exist, and so there was a dirt road with a lot of that. We'd party quite a bit at Lake Blackwell, but it was all dirt roads. You didn't want to go out there when it had been raining, because the kids would go out there, and so I don't remember when that was done, but Stillwater was little. I walked all over town.
Did it have movie theaters?
Yeah, we had, okay, downtown they had the Aggie, which is between 6th and 7th on Main Street on the east side. It's where, well, it was almost on 7th Street, but you can still see a little remnants of the decoration there. Then down in the next block was the Camera and the Mecca theaters. And then they built the Leachman, which was, it's on 5th and Main, where they sell bedding now, mattresses.
Okay.
And then the campus, which was at the corner of University and Knobloch, which is now part of Pizza Place. But yeah, we had those, and then the drive-in movie that was out north of town. So movies were a big part of the recreation, you know, high school and college.
I know the Hideaway came into existence sometime in the 50s, I think, didn't it?
I believe that's probably true. I'm trying to think when he put there, because the original Hideaway was on 3rd. I don't even know what's there now, just east of Knobloch, on the south side of the street. There's, I don't know what's there, whether Washateria or something, but the original Hideaway was there and existed there for quite some time, and then moved to where it is now. But I think it must have been the 50s. It was not there when I was in college.
Do you remember when you had your first pizza?
Oh yeah, but the first pizza that we had, we made. Marilyn made it. In fact, I believe it was Joan Smith, who's Dr. Smith's wife, brought us the first pizza. And then, but people made them then. We had, you know, there wasn't DiGiorno, and there weren't a lot of pizza places even. You made it at home. And we had pizza parties, people get in the neighborhood, and, you know, a lot of little kids running around, and the women made pizzas, and we had pizza parties, you know. But now we don't go without having one in the fridge so that we can pull it out if nothing else. Once a week we'll have pizza.
And you were talking about dancing?
Oh yeah, well, like I say, the dances were a big thing, and there was one practically every weekend, or two practically every weekend. And you couldn't go to, sometimes you couldn't go to other fraternities' dances unless you were invited, or sororities. But they did have the dance hours at the university, the sorority houses, as small as they were, and it was jammed and crowded, but from, you know, 7 to 8 or something on Monday nights or a certain night, you could just go. And that's how you met people, you know.
And did the women have a curfew?
Oh, heavens, yes. You know, the freshmen had to be in at 8 o'clock in the dorms. And it's a pretty good deal for us, you know. You could have a Coke date, and then you could have another date after 8. Keep you kind of busy. But yeah, they had to be in at 8 o'clock. Marilyn lived in the dorm the first year. Freshmen lived in the dorm. And 8 o'clock, you know, they had to be in. Which was, you know, not all that bad. There wasn't any cohabiting either, you know, which is, I think, exists now, but seems strange. I still think should be a separation between the sexes. I think that's a good thing myself. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I don't think so. And Marilyn, while we were talking about the breaks, she said about where I grew up, of course, close to the campus. When I was a kid, used to go up and catch crawdads out of Theta Pond, and then go fishing at Boomer. When my dad got home, we'd go out and fish from Boomer, use the crawdads for fish bait. But the thing that about living there, when my brother was killed in '45 in Germany, my mother was a big gardener and they belonged to the garden club and all. And the garden club gave the folks a magnolia. It was probably 4 or 5 feet high. We planted it in the side yard, which was narrow and skimpy. That's the magnolia that's at the south end of the parking lot of the Development Foundation. Now, it's sick, and we're trying to do something with it, but I don't know that it's going to survive. And also there's a little plaque and a bench down there that tells the story at the south end of the parking lot there at the Development Foundation. But I'm working with them, and I appreciate it very much. That tree is not going to survive because of the building around it and everything that's been done. They're trying to capture a seed and plant another one on another area of the Development Foundation so that it will continue to exist. And we hope it does. Hope it does.
And then she also mentioned the Rock Castle.
The Rock Castle. That is, I'm not sure. You went into it from the west, off of, I'm not even sure how you got there now, but it was down north of 6th. It may be the building that's the Moose Lodge now. But there were different roads into the thing and how you got in there. But it was one of the university hangout, a great dance floor. I always had music down there, and so you take your dates and go down there. Now, wasn't a bar because this was dry at that time. And you couldn't sell beer within, I think, 200 feet of a dance place. 3-2 beer, which is supposedly non-alcoholic. So you could go out back there 200 feet and right over a fence you could buy beer and then bring it back inside. There wasn't anything against having it in the dance hall. You just couldn't sell it in the dance hall. But that was a great university hangout all the years we were in college. And I don't know exactly when it disappeared. I think when they changed the Perkins Road and built Perkins Road up, because then it virtually didn't exist. North of there existed south, but not north. And so that was a good hangout, yeah.
And was Swims?
Oh yeah.
Swims there?
Swims was a great place, you know. It was a real big college hangout. Because just the swim store, and then they had a dance hall up above it.
Is that building still standing?
Oh yeah, it's the one that it's the corner of, what is that, Elm? Well, it's right across from Eskimo Joe's.
Okay.
And the house where Stan has his business operation, that was owned by the Swims. They were I was trying to think. There were 3 brothers. They're older than I am. Paul and Busty and another one. But they lived there, and I've been in that house when the Swims lived there. You know, they had 2 kids. One of them older than me, one of them younger. They're both deceased now. But so I was in that house, and Swims was a real hangout. It was always full of college students, particularly before the war. I mean, before World War II, it was a hangout then. And then it was still a hangout afterwards, and then they built the Gray Fox up above it later. I'm not sure when. And it was a dance place and a beer hall up above Swims. I mean, then laws had changed a little bit.
Jukebox or live bands?
Huh?
Jukebox or live bands?
Jukebox mainly,
Jukebox.
yeah. And those jukebox was big things in those days. Almost a lost art now.
Sure.
With the way that the records come by. And, but I don't know, Stillwater was an easy place to grow up in. I think maybe most places were in those days, when I was growing up. We didn't have the crime that exists today. And it's a little bit surprising because the country was much poorer. During the Depression, I can remember people coming by and my mother feeding them. I mean, they'd sit on the back steps, ask if there was anything they could do. And of course the houses weren't locked because you couldn't lock the house because the iceman had to bring ice in and put it in the refrigerator, and the milkman had to bring milk in and put it in the refrigerator. So the houses were not locked. We didn't have a problem that I can recall in Stillwater. Theft. You kind of went to school and played outside and went back to school. And in high school, we had high school dances, a bunch of them. We had high school fraternities and sororities. Here in Stillwater, we had 3 of each, and they all had dances. And so we had lots of activities. Didn't have television, didn't have computers, didn't have cell phones, but we seemed to grow up okay.
I've heard other people mention Eugene Field's school, but they haven't talked much about it. Is there anything you want to say more about it?
Oh, it was, grades 1 through 6, a block and a half from my house. So we went down there, had a dirt playground that, we had an outdoor basketball court there on the playground that we'd spend time on the weekends or after school, And I don't know, I think, one of the things that I remember more than others is that they didn't hesitate if somebody fouled up to give them a spanking at school. They weren't worried about a lawsuit. And if you got one at school, you might get one at home, and then you'd talk about it, So, but it was we had only 7, when I was in grade school, we had 7 teachers there. There was a split 1st and 2nd grade. Then there was a 1st grade, and a 2nd grade, and a 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade. That was all that was there. And it was the teachers, I still remember them all. And from that time, because you had them for a whole year, And they were good teachers. One of them taught all 3 of our kids at Westwood. She ended up at Westwood and taught all 3 of our kids, Lewis Law. And but that's about the only thing. It's kind of sad when they tore it down and made a grocery store.
Did you have to practice air raids?
Not that I recall. We were aware of the things, but not being in the middle of the United States, there wasn't much of a problem about that, or blackouts, either one. That was just something that you knew about. And I think one of the interesting things, of course, is the number of prison camps that were in Oklahoma during World War II. Huge number. Because they brought them in here thinking it was so far from the borders that they wouldn't have a problem with the prisoners even wanting to escape. So there was an article a couple of weeks ago on them, and there were a lot more than I thought there were. I knew there was one up by Tonkawa, but I think it said there was something like 30-some. I'm not sure that's the right figure, but in Oklahoma. But they just brought them in here. They were easy to keep track of. You know, where are you going to go? How are you going to get back to Germany or Japan? I think we just had the ones from Europe. How are you going to get back to Germany from Oklahoma? You know, no way. You know, there were some sympathizers for the Germans, but it was not, in this area, not a big thing.
Well, you mentioned the CCC camp.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, when Roosevelt came in, of course, in the depth of the Depression, or started the Big Depression, he started a number of, they called them alphabet deals, the WPA and the PWA and the CCC. The CCC was the Civil Conservation Corps, is what it was. And there's still remnants of their work. They built windrows in western Oklahoma and here because we were having so many problems with dust storms. Mm-hmm. And they built those. They did a lot of public works. It put young people to work so that they could do something. And that just happened to be where they built the camp, where they stayed overnight and fed them and all. But, you know, I was a little young to know too much about it. The WPA, another one of his, that a lot of the armories that are in, a lot of sidewalks that were built, you'll see a WPA stamp on them. Mm-hmm. And all, and I think all of these were later declared unconstitutional, but it doesn't matter. It put people to work at that time, because the times there wasn't money, you know. We've gone into a depression now, or recession. I guess we're not a depression, a recession, but there's still money in the United States that didn't exist at that time. A lot of people, the banks went broke and they lost all their money that was in the banks, you know. They weren't backed by the federal government like they are now. So it was like I say, it was an easy time, I think, to grow up. 4th of July, you did fireworks any place you wanted to, in the street, in front of your house, in your yard, or now it's against the law. So it's not now the kids have so much broad education, basically. We're teaching kids in grade school now things that we were learning in high school then, I think. And whether that's good or bad, I don't know. I'll leave that to the educators. But it was just an interesting time because you didn't think much about it. You were just growing up. You were going to school and playing your sports, which were not organized, but you played sports. So you went to sporting events. You went to school and you went to church on Sunday, Sunday school and church. And it was a relatively simple time. When I went in service in 1945, the world that I had existed in, I'd been to Ark City, Kansas, because we used to have some family reunions there. Been to Colorado Springs once when I was too young to remember. Went to Carlsbad Cavern, trip there. Went to Little Rock, Arkansas, because the dance band my brother was playing in when he was in college was playing over there, and went over there with the folks for a week. And went to, took my brother and 3 other boys to camp where they went into service just across the Texas line. And the world was small, and you also didn't know about other places because you didn't have television. You read about them. But you didn't watch things on TV or pull it up on the computer. And also, it was simple. Life was pretty simple. And like I say, I never, my folks didn't have a lot of money, but they always had enough that we had, food. And so, but I never thought about, never even entered my mind for them to give me money. That didn't exist. And I thought you were fortunate. I was fortunate enough to have the GI Bill and get out of college and go to work, and that was great. Great. My parents were wonderful. My mother died when she was like 52. I was away from home. I'd just gone to work, but and she had a high school education. My dad was born in '98, so then in those days, as soon as you were big enough to go to work, you went to work. And had I think a 8th grade education, and he left home, went to work. And he was amazing. He was amazing, because it bothered him a little bit at first, I think, moving into a college community. And here you had your educated people. After living with them for a while, I think it didn't bother him anymore. He figured out that, and he educated himself, basically, and was very good with people. Spent his last working years as the postmaster here in Stillwater. From 50s, I'm not sure quite what year he put in, 56 or 7 to up to 73. He was the postmaster here. And loved by his people. Very good at handling people. Very good. And
So I'm sure they were proud of you when you actually graduated then?
oh yeah, that's why they'd stayed here. So that I get a college education.
Do you have memories of graduation day?
Yeah, just that, just being there in the field house.
I've been happy.
Oh, sure. And like I say, it's a good day because that's the night I met my wife.
Well, did your mother sew sew your clothes, or did you buy store-bought?
Oh, if no, I think a little pair of overalls, and she certainly patched them if they needed it, and darned the socks. You didn't throw your socks away when you got a hold of them. She darned the socks. I think most of it, and then a lot of them, what my brother outgrew. And hand me down. I didn't think much about it. You had clothing, and Marilyn made a lot of stuff for our girl clothing for our daughters. She made a lot of that, and but we certainly didn't go to Oklahoma City or Tulsa to buy clothing for them, even when they were small. They didn't, and they've grown up pretty well. Our kids are pretty good kids. And our children are smart. Our grandchildren are scary smart. All of them. And it's kind of a surprise. They think B is outlandish. Everything's A's. And so they're going to do fine. We don't know about the great-grandkid. He's still 5 years old and having a ball. And well, what else can I tell you?
We've covered quite a bit. I usually, if there's nothing else, I usually ask, how would you like to be remembered?
Oh, I think of course, first, as a good father and grandfather by my family. That's first. As a good person and an honest person by other people. And I've pretty well lived that way. I think mainly that I was a decent human being, you know. And like I say, mainly the remembrance by the family is a big thing. We've been fortunate. We've had our family around a lot. The grandkids still love to come here. The one that's in New Jersey is, our first grandson is flying in Thanksgiving to help his grandmother decorate the house. She's very good. He's excellent. And they have fun doing it every year. They've done it for years, the two of them. And I just kind of step back and get out of the way, you know. But, and then the others are good children and good adults. They're not children anymore. Grandkids aren't children. They're 32, 30, and 27, 20, and 13 or 14, 13. But no, I think just as a good person, we were kind of a strange couple when we got married. This is 1950. We were both from Republican families. That hardly existed in Oklahoma at that time. Mm-hmm. And so we have enjoyed politics. We've been involved with working in politics. We're not dirty dogs or anything like that. We're just, and we're not, you know, ultra-conservative people. We're just middle of the road and believe in the right thing. And I wish if everybody did, it'd be a lot better life. But we've worked in politics, and it was a grand day for us when Henry Bellman was elected governor the first time. And one funny story on that, I was active in the chamber, and of course we'd been working in Henry's campaign. And 6 o'clock the morning after he's elected, the phone rang. And it was Virgil Simpson, who had an auto agency here, and but everything was Democratic. And he said, Dick said, I find myself in an embarrassing situation. He said, we've just elected a Republican governor. I'm chairman of the Highway and Roads Committee of the Chamber, and we don't have a Republican on the committee. Would you serve? And this is 6 o'clock the next morning, so it's really pretty funny. But how it has changed during a period of time to a healthier situation, where now, I think in Oklahoma particularly, you got somebody that fouls up, we get rid of them. You know, the Oklahomans will get rid of them, and it's because we're a balanced state right now. For the first time in our life, we have a Republican legislature, both houses, and so we've had fun with our politics. I've got friends that were dirty dog Democrats that are now the other way. I mean, they've come around. They hate to admit it, but they have, and so. It was, early politics wasn't even pleasant. They were nasty. The Democrats were nasty. I had someone tell, when I opened my office on Main Street in 59, and someone said to Marilyn, said, you know, is Dick going to stay involved in politics? Did it hurt his business? Well, actually, it helped my business. I was the only option on that side for people. You know, the others weren't all dirty dog Democrats. They just weren't committed. They wouldn't get involved. And we've always been involved, and I think in a proper way. We haven't been nasty. We've kind of laughed at times when things went our way, certainly, but I'm happy with Oklahoma politics right now. I'm not happy with national politics, but I'm happy with Oklahoma politics, because I think we're a healthy state. We have to have a balanced budget, which is healthy, makes us live within our means, which everyone should do, families, government, no. But no, I don't know that I have a whole lot else. It was, I think the thing in growing up that I've said before is that Stillwater was a little town when I was growing up. It's not now. It's a nice sized town now, but it was a little town then. And there was no concern about going any place you wanted to in Stillwater. You wandered all over town. You walked. Gosh, I didn't have a bicycle even. My brother had gone to work and earned himself one, making 15 cents an hour, and bought a bicycle. And I think when he got to college, well, I got his bicycle. But
and you love to love orange very early.
oh yes, 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 yes. I've always said that, you know, when the kids were growing up, I put on red and white if I wanted to whip them. And they've grown up good. They've grown up very good. No, I've been a Oklahoma A&M, Oklahoma State fan forever, because I've been here forever, and always will be. You know, I love the place. You know, everything hasn't gone smoothly all the time at the university, and they've been headed by the right people a lot of the times, and by the wrong people part of the time. But we've known an awful lot of our friends are university people, and particularly not so much now, but in my working days and all, because they were clients and they socialized with us. I mean, they didn't just socialize with university people, they socialized with town people, and a lot of them are awfully good friends of ours. And so, particularly Dick and Lynn Poole, you know, were very good friends. We summered with them. They had a place in Colorado, we had a place in Colorado, and we get together. We were friends. We were the type of friends that if you didn't see them for 9 months, you stepped in the door and it was just like it had been yesterday. And that's a wonderful feeling.
Sure.
But I think you know, hopefully the young people today will make the friends that we made at college, because those of you, I think more they're your lifetime friends, because it's your last place of education more than your high school friends. Your high school friends you're still attached to and go to reunions and stuff, but the 4 years you spend in college, those become your friends for life. And my best friend for life is sitting right over here.
Well, if you don't have anything else, we'll sign off.
No. You have something else? Oh.
I think you have to tell her about what Gene Jackson did for you.
What?
What Gene Jackson did for you.
Oh.
Having to do with the university.
Well, yeah, one of my fraternity brothers, Gene Jackson, and the university is very familiar with him because he's given a lot of money to it. In the arts and science field, I think. But in college, he was a fraternity brother, one of those who I wasn't real close to at that time, but after we became alumni, became very close to when we started having the reunions and all. He was a successful businessman back in Pennsylvania, and started some wonderful things health-wise for the people back there. But, you know, he was just a good friend, and we'd meet each other at reunions and stuff like this. They took him into the Hall of Fame. He asked me to be his presenter, and so I did that. And then we had a reunion here, oh gosh, 10 years or so ago. And he was going to come. He was very ill. He got cancer. He was going to come and couldn't, and died shortly thereafter. then his attorneys got a hold of me sometime later. He had left the university a $50,000 scholarship in my name and 3 other fraternity brothers. So he left them another $200,000 at the time he died in our names, which was you know, you don't get over those.
No.
Yeah, I think that's about all. I've had a wonderful time. I love talking about Old Stillwater. We spent time with some old high school friends the other day trying to remember what stores were on Main Street at the time and all, but I appreciate it very much. I hope this is of some use to you.
It's been great. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
You're more than welcome.